I was really lost. And I remember my uncle, he showed me a couple things. And yeah, I would go down there after school. And of course, Chris, our singer, and I went to kindergarten with each other. So we grew up 5 years old, man. And his dad was a great guitar player, and mine too. So we kind of had a little bond there because, um, he and I gravitated toward each other, went to school our whole lives. And when I was in seventh grade, I brought my drums to do a drum solo at the talent contest.
Welcome to It Was All a Dream with me, Nathan. Today I'm joined by John Fred. If you want to introduce yourself, let people know who you are and what it is you do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. My name is John Fred Young. I play drums for the band Blackstone Cherry.
Amazing. So
That's me.
was it always your dream to step into music? And I know that you play drums, but did you always want to step into the music field of life?
Well, I think as a kid, I was very interested in music. I have a father who Richard, who's a guitar player, and an uncle Fred, who is a drummer, and they play in the band the Kentucky Headhunters. Um, Very well known country rock band. And so growing up as a kid, like I used to see them play and go to their shows, and so that was kind of the biggest, I think, inspiration for me. Um, Seeing those guys, and you know it's always, um when you're a kid, I think what you're around is it carves you out, of what you're potentially going to do. And I, as a young kid, I didn't really say, oh, I'm going to be a musician like my dad or my uncle. But I think later, probably around 12, I was in school band, so I played drums. And yeah, I was talking to my dad and uncle, and I was like, man, I got to get a drum set. And I remember I sold a antique pocket knife collection I had at a gun show. And my dad had a booth, and I bought one of my uncle's very old Ludwig kits, vintage kit. And he was really reluctant to sell it, man, because it was actually the um, Black Oyster Pearl kit like Ringo had, but it was like a '70s model. But I remember, like, I think he just took like a couple $100, and it was worth a lot more than that. But he wanted to see me play, and so I set up uh at their practice house, which they, like, we live on a farm down here in Metcalfe County. And my dad and uncle, when they were teenagers, they put their band together. And my great grandmother, their grandmother, let them practice in an old farmhouse down here, which is known as the practice house now. And
Yeah.
so as a kid, like, my grandparents lived down here, and the practice house was here. So I was always running around, on the farm and stuff. So I grew up in that house. And when I kind of wanted to play drums, and got my kit from Fred, I set everything up down there, and I had no idea how to play. I had
Yeah.
watched my uncle for years and years, but I didn't know if, like, if you were supposed to hit the hi-hat more than the snare. I was totally had no clue. It wasn't like I was born with this, like, ability to just like get into it. I was really lost. And I remember my uncle, he showed me a couple things. And yeah, I would go down there after school. And of course, Chris, our singer, and I went to kindergarten with each other. So we grew up 5 years old, man. And his dad was a great guitar player, and mine too. So we kind of had a little bond there because, um, he and I gravitated toward each other, went to school our whole lives. And when I was in seventh grade, I brought my drums to do a drum solo at the talent contest, which was the biggest hot mess. I don't even know what I did. I just beat on stuff. And I remember Chris came up to me and afterwards he was like, man, he was like, my dad's gonna get me a guitar this summer. He's like, dude, we got to put a band together. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, dude. So he didn't know how to play. I didn't know how to play, but we went down to the practice house and we sit there and I think we were trying to play Hell's Bells, um, maybe a Skinner song, Teen Spirit, 101.
Yeah.
And later, like there was another guy in school that he was in band. Chris was in school band too, and he was like, yeah, I've got a bass guitar. So he came down and jammed with us for a while. And, it just evolved over the years. Of course, Ben came in. Ben lived in Glasgow, the next county over, which is
Yeah.
city over, Barron County. And Chris and I live here in Metcalfe County, 10 minutes apart. So Ben came down with a buddy of his one night when we were in high school. And we were, he picked up the guitar and we were like, man, this guy's really good, dude. So we just put the band together. The next day, I was 16, Chris was 16. It was Chris's 16th birthday, and Ben was still 15. So nuts, man. 2001, June 4th. And that's kind of how we got our band together. I went on a rant there. Sorry, I do that.
No,
If you ask me
you're
something, I'll
absolutely
just go.
fine. No, you're fine. It's funny because I remember hearing the story about you taking the drum kit to the talent show, and I was going to bring it up later anyway.
Yeah.
So you've already touched on it for me, and you actually touched on one of my next questions. It was what inspired the dream. Obviously, you mentioned about your uncle and your dad. So would you say that they was a huge inspiration, although you didn't have really the vision of being a musician as a child? I mean, I think it's a dream, but it's an unrealistic dream when you're a child.
Oh,
You know,
sure. I think that I have to give my dad and my uncle Fred a ton of credit because I would not be playing drums. And I think that my dad over the years, there was a lot of great guidance from him. He would sit with us at the practice house when he knew we were really serious about it. When we were 15, 16 years old, he would come down and he would help us figure out how to write songs, how to structure songs. And I remember him and my uncle Fred would be down there all the time. And Chris's dad would come and Ben's dad, Danny, would come hang out and Steve. And it was just really cool. It was like having a baseball team and all the dads were the coaches, man. They would just come down and hang, and of course we're out in the middle of the country, so you can play rock and roll as loud as you want to. And
yeah,
man, we used to I just remember in high school, we would we would get out of school, man, at like 2:45 and come down here and we would jam all day long. And we would not we would not get back home probably until like 11 or 12 and drag into school the next day and just be like, man, can't wait to get back and play. So it was just a way of life for us. We didn't really have any other fallback. We were just
yeah,
like, we're going to put a band together. But I think as your question, sorry, as a kid, I would go out with my dad and uncle on the road when they would have headhunter shows, and it was so cool watching them play. But it wasn't like I don't think I really knew I wanted to be a musician until probably I was 12 or 13. And that was the time where I kind of got my first drum kit. Chris and I started playing together. And before that, it was just like, oh, my dad and uncle are musicians, and this is what they do, and this is cool. And as a kid, like if your parent, you know, does does something like that, I don't think you ever look. It's just your dad and uncle. That's how it
yeah,
is. And so, but I knew it was cool. Um, yeah, but I think I didn't have any other way around it, man, because I'm so highly influenced by them and the music that they turned me on to as a kid. My dad, it's funny, he just brought me an album the other day. CD actually, we because I still listen to CDs. And it was funny when I was a kid. His room, he had this awesome, like, big '90s stack up CD player. and had the tape deck in it. And he had an album. It was Armchair Theater by Jeff Lynne. And man, that
Okay.
album like really, really inspired me. I think not so much as a drummer, but I think a songwriter, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, Jeff was in the Traveling Wilburys. But if you haven't heard that record, man, that's a great solo record of his. And it came out in 1990 or 91. But it was funny. My dad, we kind of lost a copy of it, and a buddy of his on the road, he said, "Man, I got you an album the other day," and I'm like, "All right." And it was an original Armchair Theater album. But
Wow.
he was always, him and my uncle both were always like turning me and the other guys on to different music that we wouldn't have heard as kids.
Yeah.
I know one thing, like growing up practicing in the practice house. I've said this 1,000 times, but it's just an old country, 2-story home. But when you go in, when my dad and uncle were teenagers, the place didn't have any water. My dog is drinking my
You're
coffee.
fine.
How you doing, buddy? The place didn't have any heat, so it had electric, but it didn't have a stove or anything. So, or a wood stove. So they would take albums and posters and plaster them on the wall, because a lot of those homes back in those days, you didn't even have insulation. So
Yeah.
that was kind of their way of like keeping the heat in, like when they'd use a kerosene heater. And but what it turned into is like you walk in there and like there's posters of, Howlin' Wolf, Janis Joplin, Skinner, the Stones, Lead Belly, all these Cream, all these incredible artists. They kind of made a time capsule inside this house that, unintentionally they was doing because they loved that music. All the
Yeah.
all the old blues stuff, the Motown, early, British rock, American rock. And so when we were teenagers and went in there, I was just kind of used to it because I'd seen it. But I remember when we were jamming, everybody was like, "Man, I never heard of this band." So the internet was still in the, like, I don't know, it was like 2001, two,
Yeah.
era. But we were searching these artists and stuff up. So it was strange because we were into all the heavy stuff like Metallica, Pantera, and the newer stuff. Obviously Corn was huge, and Limp Bizkit, and we were seeing
Yeah.
that on TV. But then also we were rehearsing in a house that was like a rock and roll museum out in the middle of the woods, going back to the 70s. So it was a really crazy way we were influenced as a band, and very fortunate, man, very fortunate to have so much of that wealth of knowledge, being that age and in that, time period.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite nice as well because I've spoke to some guests and they've mentioned that they've had like the vision for their career mapped out from 4, 5, 6 and stuff like that. But then I've also spoke to people where they're like, oh, I've been 13, 14. Like for me personally, I was 17, 18 when I started doing photography and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I think it's nice to hear that like you don't have to have that dream so early. Like you don't have to know what you want so early on. But like yourself, you got your drum kit at the age of 12 and it just kind of clicked with you of like, I'm quite passionate about this. And before you knew
Yeah,
it,
man.
you're living it.
Well, I think too, it's crazy how you can be influenced at a very young age, but
Yeah.
not really get into it until you're a teenager. Um, and then people, there's people that are 40 years old, 45 years old, that pick up an instrument, and within 5 years, or any kind of, creative art that they're into, or anything. I don't know if it's woodworking, or if it's like working on trucks, or it's playing music, whatever, painting, and they become a professional within,
Yeah.
a master craftsman of their art within, 4 to 5 years. I read a study the other day, and it was talking about, if you want to be a professional, excuse me, I don't know anybody's professional, but a master at your
Yeah.
craft, you need at least 10,000 hours. And I got to thinking about it, and I was like, there's 24 hours in a day. You can't do it 20. You got to sleep and eat, But I was like, if you really kind of broke the math down, I was like, that is a lot of hours. But man, if you just like get in the cabin and woodshed. If you're passionate about something, it's never too late to start anything, you know. And but you know, obviously, if you got a head start on something, that's always better, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think I wouldn't even say you necessarily had a head start on the music career because, like you said, you got a drum kit at the age of 12. You didn't even know how to work it. Like,
Yeah,
do you know it? So it's not necessarily even like you just had the surroundings around you, but you were so dedicated to learn that craft that you
sure.
found the answers that you needed.
Oh, that's that. Yeah,
Um,
definitely, 100%.
and that, so would you say that your obviously your uncle Fred and your dad are going to be up in this list, but who would you say your idols was, or heroes? Like that could be either musically or personal.
So definitely my heroes would be obviously my dad and my uncle. But man, growing up, like my you know, outside of my uncle being my biggest influence for drumming, um, number two is John Bonham, of course. And that's just like, you know, that's kind of like a given. You know, he did so much stuff that it was just nobody was playing like he did, man. Nobody was doing those doubles and just the power. And he came from listening to a lot of different stuff, but I think that it was just the power and the energy of what he brought was just so electric, man. And then also like Ginger Baker, Mitch Mitchell for me, who of course Ginger was, you know, he played for Cream, and Mitch Mitchell was with the Hendrix Experience. Uh,
Yeah,
and of course Ian Pace and all the classic guys, man. I really gravitated toward them because I was introduced to them from Fred. He would put in, you know, albums and he was like, you got to learn this, man. You got to learn that. But also, he turned me on to Bernard Purdy, who is probably one of the greatest studio session drummers of all time. He came up with the Purdy Shuffle drum beat. And that was like, I remember watching that. There was a Hot Licks um, in, instructional series that came out in the 90s. They were on VHSs. And I remember watching Bernard Purdy, like, and I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, and it took forever to learn that beat. And
yeah,
it's kind of like it's been a staple in the drumming community. Like everybody's like, oh, you know, you got to play the Purdy Shuffle, you know. But and then there's so many others too, man. Like Tommy Alders who played with White Snake, and Ozzy, of course, and Black Oak. Um, but you know, I think those guys kind of definitely with Fred's guidance. Those guys were some of my favorite drummers, you know. But there's just lots of other guys that have come out in the last, you know, 5 years that are incredible, man. And I
yeah,
admire those guys. And every drummer now is on YouTube, and they've got, you know, they're doing incredible stuff. So I always try to go back to those old drummers that I grew up with, but also, you know, I'm constantly, you know, seeing stuff on Instagram, seeing stuff online of newer guys. And yeah, but I think, you know, my dad and uncle are definitely my heroes. But as far as, you know, I guess like rock drummer, I got to, you know, it's Bonham, man. So funny. I'll
yeah.
tell you a funny story. So I was out in California for the NAMM show one year, and I was doing a signing for the drum company, and we took a massive photo out on these steps, and Jason Bonham was there, and of course I was geeking out, man, you know, and I got to meet him and stuff. We were talking, and he said, you know, what band are you in? I was like, I'm in a band called Blackstone Cherry, and he's like, well, cool. And we took the picture, and he was standing like we were on steps. He was standing right behind me, and yeah, just all kinds of like superstar drummers, man. And I'm like, you know, this is back in 2009, so I was like 20 something, and just geeking out. But I remember I heard him over my shoulder. He was going, Blackstone Cherry. He was like, man, and he kept saying it over and over. And I was like, what is he doing, man? And I remember he tapped me on the shoulder. And he goes, man, I think I've got you guys on my like iPod. It was like iPods at that time, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, do you guys have a song? He's like, no, I don't think that's you guys. And I was like, oh, crap, man. And you know, I was hoping like, oh man, maybe he really knows this. And it was funny because we started taking the pictures, and he starts humming this guitar lick, da 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 da, and I was like, I turned around, and he goes, "That's your old song, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, that's." And he goes, "What's the name of it?" I said, "It's a song called Please Come In. We just put out that album like, year before last." And he goes, "Oh, I love that song." He goes, "Man," he goes, "that's such a great riff. How'd you guys think of that?" And like without missing a beat, I said, "Oh, we stole it from your dad's band, dude. Straight up, like 100%." Like he laughed. It was so funny, man. But he was a great guy. But I had the opportunity over the years, man, to meet a lot of just wonderful musicians, man. And
Yeah.
that's one of those stories. It's like you never think sitting in an old farmhouse, like sweating to death because it's summer and there's no air conditioning, and you're like looking at the wall and there's like Led Zeppelin posters. You're gonna be 15 years later or whatever, standing, in front of the guy's son going, "Man, I dig your band." So it's funny how stuff works out, man.
So on that, you've obviously that was obviously quite a proud moment for you
Oh,
to
sure.
have that interaction and the probably the recognition from someone of like his like stardom, I guess.
Yeah.
And what would you say has been your proudest moment in your career so far?
Ooh, proudest moment. I I I know that, and I think about it all the time. Um, but when asked, I always
Oh, I'm just losing you there.
um
There we
you
go.
know playing the festivals, like some of those massive festivals, doing some of the incredible headline stuff that we've done, throughout the UK and obviously in Europe. um there's tons of proud moments that I know I have, and I know that the other guys have too. uh, but I think that, you know as far as kind of like a one that goes on the mantle, I mean, I think the Royal Albert Hall was probably one we'd put up there. um Man, opening for GNR or Guns N' Roses at Download, that was one that you stick up there. Um, but I think probably what I'm more proud of is the fact that when we have people come up and they're like, "Man, my kids are starting a band because they like your band," and I'm like, "Oh man," or you get some young girl or guy that's 16 years old, 17, 18, even younger. They're like, "Hey, I picked up this instrument because I love your all's music." Like that's when you go, "Oh man, okay, that
Yeah.
we're doing something." Or when they're like 28 and they're like, "Hey, I remember you guys when I was in sixth grade. I was listening to you all," and then I'm like, "Oh gosh, wait, no, wait, stop." I have that a lot. They're like, "Dude, I remember you guys on when I I was playing Xbox and SummerSlam, and I had that, and Lonely Train was on there in 2007." I was like, "Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome, dude."
SmackDown versus Raw.
I was 8 years old, and they're like, you know 30 now, and you're like, "Oh man, that's been a minute." Okay.
That's the first time I heard you guys. SmackDown versus Raw. I remember that.
Well, it was SmackDown versus Raw, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that. I remember getting the game. It was on the PlayStation 2. I had it. And I remember hearing this song and I was like, wow, this is sick. And then um I remember like I see you guys at Download, and then you guys was opening for Alter Bridge in 2011 at Wembley.
Yeah.
And me and my brother brought tickets to come and watch you guys. Never even heard of Alter Bridge. And that like
Really?
we had no clue who there was. Like knew of Creed, a couple of Creed songs, but didn't
Yeah.
realize it was Mark Tremonti. But yeah, no idea who Alter Bridge was. Was watching you guys, and that
Oh
then we
man.
watched Alter Bridge, and we was like, Alter Bridge are actually all right.
Oh
But yeah,
dude.
we was there
Yeah.
to watch you guys. So
Oh, that's so
um,
cool, dude. It was a great tour, man. I tell you, that tour we did with Alter Bridge, that was man, that was, I would probably put that up there too, because we had we done a lot of festivals and a lot of
yeah,
headline tours and stuff, but um yeah, that kind of, when we were on tour with the guys on that run in 2011. Stuff started really heating up. I mean, we had done the arenas with Nickelback, we'd done the arenas with Def Leppard and Whitesnake before that in the UK,
yeah,
but yeah, it felt like, oh man, somebody really turned on the heat, and we were on, that was Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea record. So we had released that year, or the year before, I think. But yeah, man. So it's so strange. You know that, going back to that SmackDown versus Raw, what's funny is that came through. I remember the company called us that were working our publishing at the time, and they were like, "Hey, do you guys want to have this song, this video game?" And we were like, "Oh man, that'll be cool." And I remember, dude, I mean, it seems crazy, but you don't really make a lot from those type of syncs, right? I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
because you're getting the massive exposure. So I remember, we were just like, oh yeah, dude, we don't care if they pay us anything. We'll just give them a song, put them in there. And that song, I meet more people that played that game and heard Lonely Train, and they're like, dude, I never heard you, just like you were saying right now,
Yeah.
dude, never heard you guys, and oh man, I played that game, and it's so funny. But now, how old are you now?
28.
28. See, I nailed it, didn't I? I was like, yeah, they're like
Yeah.
28 years old. They come up to you, they're like, man, I was 11, dude. Oh man, that's so funny, man. But dude, you're talking about like PS2 and all that stuff. So I'm 38, so we're 10 years apart. And I remember growing up, I was born in 84, so like the very first console I ever had was the original Nintendo, the NES, right? Oh man. And I remember playing it, and then I went to the Super, and it just kind of, I think I had a PlayStation 1, and I got out of it. I think that's when, like, maybe 13 years old, it was all music.
Yeah.
It was just, head first, playing, trying to figure out how to play drums. And I I remember there was this huge gap in my, like, Nintendo nerd, years. I didn't have anything. I didn't know what was coming out, the consoles, because we were just, like I said, so involved. And then we started touring, and man, I remember Ben brought out GoldenEye for N64.
Yeah.
Dude, that game, like, we played that so much on our bus. There were so many arguments and thrown controllers and people screaming at people. Because, dude, man, once you got that golden gun, or it was just, that was some of the most fun memories on the road. And it's so funny. I actually started I started back in 2020. I started collecting all the old consoles, going back and like going to pawn shops, antique stores, junk stores, and finding like all the old Xbox games, the PS2
Mm.
stuff. And so I've got this, like, back where we in our house, the bedroom where we recorded the record. I've got this, like, one room that's just like nothing but, like, it's stacked, man, with consoles and stuff. So I've been finding them, and my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I'm just going to sit around and play and review these old games. So who knows? But
Yeah.
it's fun
That'd be
though.
amazing.
It's fun. I did. It's crazy though. So going back to your talking about Raw, I found that game the other day, and I saw it, and I'm like, that's the game. That's the game we're on, because I never owned it, so I bought it for like $1,
Yeah.
and it's so funny. I was like, man, now But yeah, man, it's funny how a lot of, even like the Tony, like, I remember there was a lot of stuff on Tony Hawk's like game, like all those games that, like, it had bands on there like Offspring, and stuff that,
Yeah.
like, a lot of bands really got discovered that way, you know, through video games.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like the Tony Hawk soundtrack to me is my childhood. So like those like pop punk bands and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That's
there's
pretty
like no,
much like my music taste. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, dude, yeah. I was not,
So
I never played any, like I said, I was kind of out of the gaming world at that time, so like I never really got to play. I played like Tony Hawk stuff later on, but there was like this whole thing where I had to go back and learn, like, when did this game come out, and like, man, like, so there's just like, it's almost like I hit my head. It was like playing Super Nintendo, and then PlayStation 1 is nothing. for like 12 years. So, but but yeah, the gaming world is so massive, dude. Like, you know, it's incredible. It really is. And I think it's cool how there is, there's still bands, being discovered. I know a lot of stuff now is it's more kind of soundtrack type stuff. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
creators making music for in the gaming world that, they're not like throwing like every new band on there anymore. But yeah, sorry, went off on a tangent, man.
No, you're fine. So you and the band have achieved mega success. You guys have sold out arenas and you've done world tours. You've had like number one songs and huge albums. So just with that success, how would you say you've achieved such great success, such like mass amounts?
Well, I think, yeah, first off, success is a wild word, right? So it means a lot of different things to different people. And
Yes.
what success may be to me might not be to somebody else. But I think just the ability, um, the fact that we were so fortunate to be where we're from, very small town, very proud to be from that small town here, and also in Glasgow, Edmonton, Glasgow. Um,
Yeah.
I think that the fact that we have people who, man, best fans in the world that follow us around and dedicate their time to coming to shows, that come out and love the music we actually write. That's like, I mean, you really roll the dice when you put a band together,
Yeah.
and that's you have to believe in it as a musician. You have to love what you're doing, the music you're creating, and you have to, love the guys you're in a band with too, or girls. You have to be a team. But to, I think, you know, the fact that we are still doing this after over 20 years now. The band was put together in 2001. Um, it's crazy, man. I don't know. I mean, we're obviously we've got a new record that's going to be released this year. Um, we we just our singles coming out very soon,
Is
and
that nervous, right?
yeah, yep, nervous, and that'll be coming out really soon. And of course, we're able to go put out those records. We have a great record label that believes in us, and we've got a great road crew. Our guys, been with us for a long time,
Yeah.
and they're very supportive of us and take care of us on the road. And we got a great management team that've been with us since day one. And our families, man, we have a very, very strong family. Our individual families, and I think, man, we're just very lucky, very. And I give a lot of the credit to my dad and uncle for helping out in the early years, and all our families. It takes it, man. It's hard to get to a point where you can do what you love and go out and do it. And we're just, man, we're just very lucky and fortunate that people like what we do and they dig the music. And I think maybe one thing why we're, you know, of course, we started touring in 2007 over in the
Yeah.
UK, over in Europe, and man, nobody had ever heard of us. I mean, we were, we went with some buddies of ours in a band called Hinder. They were really massive here in
Okay.
the
Yeah.
states, and at the time they had some big radio songs, and they'd never been over. So they asked us if we would go support them, and we said, well, yeah. So we got over there, and the promoters didn't even know we were supposed to be on the bill. They were like, "Are we supposed to pay y'all?" We're like, "Yeah, man." So, but it went from doing that, riding around in a little van, to just we kept going back, and here in America, we've oh man, we've toured with so many different bands and played so many, you know, places, and it's just, I don't know. I don't have a formula for it. The only thing I can say, if you're out there and you're a aspiring musician that, man, if as long as you believe in it and you think it's something that you love and you love doing, just stick with it, because, man, eventually, you're gonna get a following. And now it's, I mean, I don't mean it's easier, but we put our band together before we had social media, man. I remember
Yeah.
Facebook was still like a like you had to have a college email address, right, to even have a Facebook account. That's how many years ago that was. So we were putting flyers on cars, and just doing everything you could, and borrowing people's pickup trucks and cars to load equipment to go to shows. So but I think artists now, bands and singer songwriters, musicians, um, uh, content creators, artists, photographers. It's not that it's easier, because you still have to make genuine stuff that you believe in, and hopefully other people will appreciate too. But I think that there's some great tools out there now,
Yeah.
that you can get your stuff out to the masses. Um, so, but yeah, I don't think there's a formula that's perfect for everything, but I think just hang in there like a hair in a biscuit's what they say around here.
So, okay, touching on that note then about hanging in there, you must have had plenty of times where you've had knockbacks and no's in even in your early career, like maybe even when you were trying to learn a certain lick or or something like that. Has there ever been a time, either when you're on the road and you're missing family, and you've got to the point where you're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if this is what I want. If there has been that time, what made you kind of push through it to kind of stick with it?
Well, I think when you're first starting out in a band, that
Yeah,
if you're at a young age, you might be single, you might not have be married yet or anything with kids. So I mean, that can make things, I think, easier in the aspect of maybe being away from home and things like that. Of course, we got kids now, and obviously we're all married, and it's the only thing with touring that is hard for me personally is just it's being away from my kids. I know I can, that's just a given though, man. You miss them, but also, I got to do this and I got to feed them. So,
yeah,
but you know, I think every band, I think, goes through hurdles and
yeah,
challenges. We've been, um, I mean, dude, list. We got a list, of things, but I've we've always been very strong to rely on each other,
yeah,
and to really go, hey, we're gonna get through this, and we have, and I think that's just a testament to our brotherhood, and you know, just digging in, man, digging your heels in, and not letting something stop you. I mean, we've been dropped by record labels. It's it's it happens. But I think change is, when you can look at change with a positive attitude and go, okay, cool, this happened for a reason. I'm a big believer in the universe. Does things for a reason. So you just gotta, like I said, dig your heels in and kind of go, we're gonna get through this. And maybe this was,
yeah,
it might be like a situation that, at the time, if you're in a band or something, and something seems really hard and you can't get something working the right way, it's I always find out it's like if you're trying to go through a brick wall and you can't get through, or there's a rock sliding your way, you got to quit looking forward and look to the left or right and go, okay, we're gonna go around this thing. And I know
yeah.
that sounds so silly and elementary, but it's the truth, man. It is. There's always a way to make something work if you've got your heart and passion set to do it.
Yeah, I think we often overlook that, to be honest with you. As humans, I think we always try to just battle everything head on. And I think if you
Yeah.
sometimes you're facing, like you said, that brick wall, if you take that step back, do you know what I mean? You'll probably see footprints have already gone round the brick wall.
Oh,
And
that's a good one. Yeah, absolutely.
that so that was quite a nice bit of advice you actually gave there. So my second from last question is to anyone watching that wanted to either achieve what you've achieved in some form of like creating a band or anything like that, or putting out their first album, um, what advice would you offer them?
Well, I think that a good piece of advice would be if you're a musician and you're wanting to put a band together, um, man, just find some people that really have the same drive and passion for playing, and yeah, just get in some, if it's your parents' basement or a garage, or if it's a shed, wherever you got to go, and just get in there and sweat together and listen to records, and figure out what all the stuff you guys like collectively, and make something really cool and different, and I think maybe don't be afraid to you know be different, because that's
Yeah,
what all the greatest bands that I think we all love, look up to, those classic legends. They really didn't sound like they all were, let's take Sabbath and Zeppelin and Cream and Skinner and Aerosmith and all the greats, and go, oh man, but they all sounded, we all love them, but they all sounded different, and I think that's some good advice for any young aspiring individual, no matter if it's music or anything. I mean, just
yeah,
if you
absolutely.
love, have a passion for it, just go for it, man. Believe in yourself. I know that sounds, you know, uh, very
Yeah,
cliche, but it's truth, man. Because I think, uh, everybody's their own hardest critic on themselves, and
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
human, hey, we second guess each other. Like, dude, we were making this last record. I've done it every time where I'll play something. And I'm like, oh, like recording, and I'm like, Dad, gummit, man, I could do that better. And like on my earphones, everybody's like, "That's the take, dude. You nailed it, bro. That was great." I'm like, "No, guys, no, I messed it up." And so it's sometimes well, it's like I think probably some artists, some painters and things like that, that probably have pieces of work that they go, oh man, I can't believe I painted this. This was 3 years ago. This is terrible. And then somebody's,
Yeah,
next thing you know, somebody's going, hey man, how much would you sell that for? You know?
yeah,
So it's always, every individual has a different set of eyes, and we could all hear the same song or we could look at the same painting, but we're going to interpret that different, or have different feelings. So, um, yeah, just get a bunch of good dudes or gals and put a band together, and
yeah.
go get a van, and dude, just go rock and roll,
Enjoy
man,
it.
and enjoy it. Yeah, that's above all, you got to enjoy it. Like, I think that as you grow as a musician, right, and you have a band, one thing that as you the years go on, you learn that hey, this is a business too, and we got to take care of
Yeah, definitely.
the nails and things like that. But at the end of the day, like, I know I can say this for the rest of you guys too. When you walk on stage, it's like, man, that hour and a half, or that hour, or, however long you're playing, that's like, dude, that's what, it's what you do it for. And the fans are out there having a great time, and you see people, how the music, affects them. And
Yeah,
that's very, very, amazing feeling, being, somebody in a band that's created something and people like it, it's very humbling.
yeah, 100%. It must be amazing. Like, and for you guys especially, like you mentioned earlier about um coming over to the UK for the first time, not even knowing that you was on the bill, to
Yeah.
then coming back last year. I want to say it was last year, maybe the year before now. It's gone so quick. And selling out the Royal Albert Hall and having the entire Royal Albert Hall singing your songs back to you.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. It really
Like what
is.
watching that transition for you especially, like being able to going from stood in a barn with Chris as he's telling you that he's about to get his first ever guitar, to then seeing him stood up with a guitar, like probably his signature model, stood on the stage with, I don't even know how many the Royal Albert seats, probably 20,000, maybe 16 or something like that. But that amount of people singing back to him a song that you guys have written together must be like a tearful moment for you.
Oh, 100%, man. Especially when he did things my father said, and you know, I think yes, that Roy Albert Hall show will go down in history. Like I said, put that on the mantle, man, because it'll
Yeah,
always be in. I remember walking in that first day of sound check, and I was like, okay, I was like, man, this is different,
yeah.
but
It was a
but
great
no,
feeling.
dude, I think everybody felt that way, and
Yeah,
yeah, but I tell you, man, it does kind of it is mind blowing at times because um, music is a powerful thing,
yeah,
and we've had people over the years tell us that what songs meant to them and how it helped them, and you know, um, that's probably of you were asking me earlier what's the proudest moment. Um, it's not a moment, but I think I know I can speak for the other guys too. Is when you have people come up to you and say, "Hey, man, this album got me through this. This song helped me, build back a relationship with somebody. This song gets me through the day." That's the stuff that you go, man. we're the music is a lot larger than what we are, and you never understand how impactful a song can be to somebody's life. Not just background noise that it's playing in a bar and everybody's dancing and having a good time. That's incredible. But when it really reaches down deep and it changes somebody's life, we kind of look at that like, man, that's a huge responsibility, as a musician. And you go, man, so we are indebted to people that have are amazing fans that have been following us for years and years. And so I think those are the greatest moments when you have moments like that, when people tell you those amazing stories about your music.
yeah. That must be a quite a surreal moment.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, because I
Uh,
mean, you never know when you're writing a song what it's gonna transform into, and I've heard Chris and Ben say too. It's like you write the song and you kind of what it means to you, and we were all four sitting on the bus, Steve, Chris, and Ben and I. We were like, you were talking about songs maybe a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, it's funny you can write a song, and every band member can have a different feeling, how it makes you
yeah,
feel, and then when you play it or somebody else hears it, it's a total different meaning.
yeah,
And that's why, like, I think it's funny we get interviewed about songs, like what is the song. And sometimes it's like, well, I know what it means to me, but it's like it's for everybody that hears it really to decide. That's kind of like it's kind of like when your best friend goes and watches, like, the newest coolest movie that's out, and they like come and tell you, like, dude, and this is what happened. I'm always like, dude, don't spoil it. Let me make my own decision.
yeah, definitely. It's funny. I just want to touch on actually something you said, and it was about the Royal Albert Hall show. And I know that was quite like a one of your proudest moments. Can I just say it was actually one of my proudest moments too? Um, because a number of reasons. One, you was one of the first ever bands that I ever listened to. And I remember one of the first things I ever bought was a guitar pick necklace with your album cover on from your self-titled album, and it was like a little necklace that I used to wear all the time. And that so I'd been a fan of you since I was a teenager, and then when I got the text from Mike about like joining you guys, I replied so fast, and I text my brother instantly, and I was like yo, look at this! I'm gonna go work Blackstone Cherry, and then not only that, it was actually one of my first ever paid gigs. I think it was probably the first paid gig that I'd ever done with the music industry as well, and that which
Really?
like nearly after like 10 years of doing photography, and that it was yeah that was one of my first ever paid gigs. So that
Oh,
was
well,
a proud moment for me to first ever get that like recognition and paycheck, but then be sharing that moment with a band that I idolized when I was a teenager. So
let me tell you that means a lot, man. Thank you, and dude, that's so cool. I know exactly what pick necklace you're talking about too. I do. I remember when we made those up, and no, that's so cool, dude. I mean, man, thank you, and tell your brother thank you too. I really appreciate that.
and then just last question now is it's a bit more of a fun one. Like, has there ever been a song that you've heard and you've gone like, oh shit, I wish we wrote that song.
Oh, are you kidding me? Yeah, like all the
Yes.
time.
What's the one song that you've like? It could be Adele. It could be something really random. I know you guys done a cover of an Adele song, and it was incredible. It's one of my favorite songs. So
And thank you. No, hey, are you kidding? Rolling Deep. I wish we wrote that song. We did that at Download. You know, we were
yeah,
talking about when the same year we did the tour with Alter Bridge. That was, man, if I'm not wrong, that was 11 too. That was when we played Download in 2011. And I remember Chris, man, he was like massively into Adele and still
yeah.
is, but I remember he was like, dude, man, he's like, we just please work this up at sound check and like just try this. And we were like, all right, cool. All right, cool. So we did, you know, I don't think anybody at Download expected us to play that song. You know, that came out of left field,
I
man.
remember watching that. I remember watching it live, and I used to go back because somebody recorded it on and put it on YouTube. I used to
Yeah.
listen to the live version, and it was filmed on the worst phone. Audio was
Oh,
blown out, and I was like, I've just got to hear the version. It was so cool.
this is so strange, but I actually just played that video you're talking about. It was kind of like from a side, right? From
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Ben's. I played it for my oldest daughter the other day because she was talking about Adele, and I, Rolling Deep came on. I was like, "Hey, I was like, you like that song?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I love it." And I was telling her, you know, who uh who sang it and everything. And we were talking. I was like, I was like, we did a version of that song, and she was like, what? I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me pull it up. So I pulled it up on YouTube and I'm playing it, you know, and it's just, the audio
yeah.
is terrible. But, and she's watching it and I'm like, what do you think? And she's like, I like the other one better. like, I'm like, well,
It.
okay, yeah, I get it. I
I
get it.
would. I discovered it. I discovered it that it's actually on Spotify. There's a version you played it live, and it was recorded, and it's there's a
Cool.
live version of it.
That is
So
really cool.
yeah, I'll try and find you the link, and I'll send you the link.
Yeah, send me the link, man. I don't think I've heard that. We did get a so the professional company that was filming for Download. I mean, they always film and you know out
Yeah,
front. We did get a copy of that, and I've
oh
got a
no,
copy of that. I don't know if that's up on YouTube or not, but that's like that high. You know, that was the professional high grade. They had the booms
yeah,
and stuff out. But yeah, Downloads a man. That's just a fun time. I mean, I remember we did the direct support for Guns N' Roses back in 18, and man, you talk about nervous. Oh my gosh, like that was a lot of people that day, man. And we
yeah.
would, I
I
think,
was in the crowd that day as well. It just went
at least,
back and back and back.
dude, unreal, unreal. But no, we've had some amazing opportunities and great memories. I mean, all over the place playing at festivals and the tours, you know. And but you know, we always say this too. It's like if there's 50 people in a club or there's 50,000 people in the audience, we're going to put
Yeah,
on the same show that we do, you know. And there might just not be enough room on stage, but we're
yeah.
going, you know, we're going to do it, man. But no, it's all good, man. It's crazy. It just keeps rolling. You know, we're lucky to be doing this and just making more music, and that's why I was going back to what you said, man, about the Robert Hall. Like that's so crazy, man. Like you're one of your more memorable gigs was the Hall, and look, that I'm glad you were there. That's the first night we got to meet too, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
it was a very cool moment. But no, I mean I can't thank you guys enough. I mean I've been a fan, so it's really cool to have you not only as friends now, and I look forward to seeing you guys when you're back over here in July at the festival. But as in like to be able to have you on as a guest here and just to have like your stuff on my wall signed to me and stuff like that, you know. It held some great memories, so I appreciate that.
Hey, that means a lot to me and us. Thank you, Nate. Really appreciate that.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of It Was All a Dream. We appreciate your time and support. We hope that you enjoyed the episode and you feel inspired to achieve your dreams.
Be sure to give us a follow on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can contact us and stay connected with us if you have any feedback on the episodes or guest recommendations. Be sure to stick around after this to see what's upcoming in the next episode. Thank you.
So I'm Jack, and I run the little clothing brand Modern Streets, and yeah, it's inspired by punk rock culture, and we're still going, and that's the important part. So